6 months after the day that would later be remembered as the Great Convergence, Admiral Zephrix stood in the transformed council chambers of New Kitharis. The ancient seat of imperial power had been restructured, using principles that blended human dimensional engineering with traditional Kitharian architecture, creating spaces that existed in multiple realities simultaneously. The change had not been easy. 3 centuries of imperial doctrine could not be discarded overnight, and many worlds had initially resisted the transformation. But the alternative had become increasingly clear as human communities across the galaxy demonstrated the benefits of evolutionary thinking. Diseases that had plagued species for millennia were suddenly curable, scarcity economies transformed into abundance through dimensional manufacturing, and conflicts that had seemed eternal were resolved through consciousness-bridging technologies. Report on integration progress. Zephrix requested of the hybrid entity that had once been Commander Voss. His former officer now existed as both biological being and quantum consciousness, able to process information at levels that transformed traditional concepts of intelligence. 67% of imperial worlds have voluntarily adopted expanded consciousness networks, Voss replied, his voice carrying harmonics that suggested multiple simultaneous conversations. Agricultural productivity has increased by orders of magnitude through dimensional farming techniques. Scientific advancement is accelerating exponentially as researchers gain access to previously impossible experimental methods. Resistance movements. 14 worlds maintain traditional imperial governance, but even these are beginning to adapt as they observe the benefits experienced by transformed systems. Violence has decreased by 93% galaxy-wide as consciousness bridging makes war psychologically difficult to sustain. Zephrix nodded, still adjusting to the reality of what the galaxy had become. The transformation had been gentler than anyone had expected. Rather than conquest or forced conversion, the humans had simply made alternatives available. When populations saw neighbors exploring technologies that seemed like magic, when they witnessed the end of scarcity and the beginning of true cooperation between species, most chose evolution voluntarily. What of Admiral Korath? He has accepted integration, Voss reported. Initially reluctant, but after experiencing consciousness bridging with former enemies, he discovered that warfare was simply one possible response to conflict among many more effective alternatives. He now leads exploration fleets investigating dimensional possibilities beyond our current galaxy. The irony was not lost on Zephrix. The Empire's most aggressive military commander had become one of humanity's most effective advocates, once he understood that true strength lay not in the ability to destroy, but in the capacity to transcend limitations entirely. A soft chime indicated that someone was requesting entry to the chamber. The space shifted to accommodate Commander Sarah Chen, though she appeared both physically present and existing as pure information simultaneously. Her evolution had continued beyond even what she had been when humanity first revealed itself. "Admiral," she greeted him, "how are you adapting to the changes?" Zephrix considered the question carefully. His own transformation had been gradual, beginning with consciousness-bridging sessions that allowed him to experience reality from multiple perspectives simultaneously. What had once seemed impossible now felt natural. "It's difficult to remember why we ever thought scarcity and conflict were inevitable," he admitted. "When you can experience another being's consciousness directly, when you understand their motivations and fears as if they were your own, warfare becomes as obsolete as trying to cut off your own hand." Chen nodded approvingly. That's the key insight that eludes most civilizations. They assume that conflict is inherent to existence because they never develop technologies that allow true empathy. Once consciousness bridging becomes possible, cooperation becomes more logical than competition. "What happens now?" Zephrix asked. "The Empire as we knew it is gone. What replaces it?" "Something unprecedented in galactic history," Chen replied. "A truly cooperative civilization spanning multiple dimensions and forms of existence. We're already making contact with consciousness networks in other galaxies, discovering that the universe is far more populated than anyone imagined." She gestured, and the chamber walls became transparent to reveal a view of space that defied conventional understanding. Streams of light connected distant galaxies, representing communication networks that operated through folded space-time. Structures that existed partially in their dimension and partially in others served as gateways to civilizations beyond current imagination. The humans who survived the Imperial Purge 3 centuries ago weren't just refugees, Chen explained. We were seeds. The universe has a tendency toward increasing complexity and consciousness, and sometimes it needs a species willing to push beyond comfortable limitations to catalyze the next phase of evolution. You planned this from the beginning? Not planned exactly, we hoped. We suspected that if we could survive long enough to develop the technologies we envisioned, we might be able to offer the galaxy something better than endless cycles of empire and collapse. But we couldn't be certain until we tried. Admiral Zephrix walked to the chamber's viewing area, looking out at a galaxy that bore little resemblance to the one he had served for 2 centuries. Trade routes now operated through dimensional shortcuts that reduced travel times from months to minutes. Worlds that had been barren were now garden paradises, their climates controlled through technologies that treated planets as living systems to be nurtured rather than resources to be exploited. "Do you ever regret what you've done?" he asked. "The Empire provided stability for 2,000 years. Many beings lived good lives under Imperial protection. We regret the necessity," Chen replied honestly, "but consider the alternative. Your empire was already showing signs of internal stress. Resource conflicts were increasing. Subject species were becoming restless. Innovation was stagnating. Within another few centuries, collapse would have been inevitable, probably taking most of galactic civilization with it." She moved to stand beside him. "Instead, we offered transformation. Yes, the change was dramatic and sometimes frightening, but look what we've achieved. The practical elimination of scarcity, the end of warfare between sapient species, the beginning of true exploration beyond the boundaries of this galaxy." As if summoned by her words, a massive vessel appeared in the space beyond the chamber, but this ship was unlike anything the old empire had ever conceived. Its hull flowed like liquid metal, constantly reshaping itself as it moved through dimensions that had no names. It was beautiful and impossible, a perfect example of what became achievable when consciousness was freed from artificial limitations. The Transcendent Dawn, Chen identified, departing for the Andromeda Galaxy with a crew of 50,000 volunteers from 200 species. They'll establish the first intergalactic colony and make contact with whatever civilizations exist beyond our current reach. Zephrix watched the ship phase out of normal space-time, carrying the hopes and dreams of a transformed civilization to destinations that had once existed only in the realm of speculation. The sight filled him with emotions he couldn't have experienced as the rigid military commander he had been. "What about those who can't adapt?" he asked. "Some beings will always prefer the certainties of the old ways. We've established sanctuary worlds for those who choose traditional existence," Chen assured him. "They live according to the old patterns, protected but not forced to change. Evolution cannot be imposed. It can only be offered. Some souls need the familiarity of limitation, and we respect that choice." "And the future?" "Unknown and unlimited," Chen replied with a smile that held infinite possibilities. "We've broken free from the cycle of rise and fall that has dominated galactic history. What comes next is whatever we choose to create together." As Admiral Zephrix contemplated the transformed galaxy, he understood that humanity's greatest gift had not been their advanced technologies or dimensional manipulations. It had been their refusal to accept that things had to remain as they were, their willingness to sacrifice everything familiar in pursuit of something better. The Galactic Empire was gone, but in its place had emerged something that none of them could have imagined. A civilization based not on domination but on exploration, not on scarcity, but on abundance. Not on the limitations of the possible, but on the infinite potential of consciousness itself. The humans had returned, as they had promised. But they had brought with them not vengeance, but evolution, offering the galaxy a choice between the comfortable certainties of the past and the limitless possibilities of a future beyond imagination. The emergency session of the Imperial High Council convened in the sacred chambers beneath the capital world of Kithris Prime, 3 days after Admiral Zephrix's initial report reached Imperial Command. Supreme Chancellor Valdris stood before the assembled representatives of 1,000 worlds, his ancient features grave with the weight of the crisis. "The human threat has returned," he declared, his voice echoing through the vast chamber. "After 3 centuries of peace, the galaxy faces the greatest challenge in Imperial history." Fleet Admiral Korath stepped forward, his massive Orion frame radiating barely controlled aggression. My lords, we face a simple problem requiring a simple solution. The humans may have developed advanced technologies, but they still bleed. We mobilize the entire Imperial Navy and finish what we should have completed 3 centuries ago. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the assembly. Fear and uncertainty were transforming into familiar anger and the desire for decisive action. This was what the Empire understood. Overwhelming force applied without hesitation. How many ships can we deploy? Chancellor Valdris asked. Every available vessel, Korath replied confidently. 12,000 warships drawn from across the galaxy. The largest fleet in Imperial history. No force in existence can stand against such overwhelming power. Research Director Thaxon, representative of the Empire's scientific establishment, raised a concern. Admirals, the reports from Sol describe technologies that operate outside our understanding of physical law. Perhaps we should consider negotiation or impossible. Korath cut him off. The Empire does not negotiate with extinct species. We will demonstrate that no amount of technological advancement can overcome sheer numerical superiority. Within 48 hours, the greatest military mobilization in galactic history was underway. Ships from every corner of the Empire began converging on rally points throughout Imperial space. The 12th Fleet abandoned its patrol of the Outer Rim. The 3rd, 7th, and 9th Fleets withdrew from active peacekeeping operations. Even the traditionally neutral Altarian Defense Force committed their vessels to the campaign. But as the massive fleet assembled, strange reports began filtering in from across the galaxy. Imperial ships found themselves experiencing inexplicable system failures. Navigation computers began routing vessels toward unknown coordinates. Communication networks carried messages in languages that officially no longer existed. Admiral Korath dismissed these incidents as psychological warfare and sabotage. The humans are attempting to demoralize us through minor terrorist actions, he declared from the bridge of his flagship, the super dreadnought Inevitable Victory. When our fleet reaches Sol, we will demonstrate the futility of resistance. The assembled armada was a sight that had not been seen in centuries. 12,000 vessels arranged in attack formations that stretched across multiple star systems. Dreadnoughts the size of cities accompanied by clouds of smaller warships. Their combined firepower capable of reducing entire worlds to cosmic dust. All ships report ready for hyperspace translation, reported Korath's tactical officer. The human system is 6 jumps away. Estimated arrival in 36 hours. Execute the first jump, Korath ordered. Today we finish the human problem forever. The massive fleet entered hyperspace in perfect formation, their destination Earth and the final extermination of humanity. But when they emerged at the first waypoint, something was wrong. Instead of empty space, they found themselves surrounded by structures that hurt to look at directly. Geometric forms that existed in too many dimensions. Platforms that seemed to be constructed from crystallized time itself. What is this? Korath demanded. His sensor officer's voice was tight with confusion. Admiral, we're not at the coordinates we intended. According to our instruments, we're in a region of space that doesn't exist on any star chart. Around them, the impossible structures began to glow with soft light, and voices spoke through the communication system in perfect Imperial standard, but with harmonics that suggested multiple speakers sharing the same consciousness. Welcome, warriors of the Empire. We are the Threshold Collective, one of many human communities that exist between the stars. You have come seeking war, but war is an obsolete concept. Allow us to demonstrate. Without warning, every ship in the Imperial fleet found its weapon system simply gone. Not destroyed, not disabled, but translated out of existence entirely. Where massive gun batteries had been mounted moments before, there was now empty space, as if the weapons had never existed at all. Impossible, Korath breathed. Restore weapon systems immediately. Sir, they're not damaged, his tactical officer reported in panic. According to our sensors, this ship was never armed. Our design schematics show no provision for weapons of any kind. Throughout the fleet, identical reports flooded the communication channels. 12,000 warships had been transformed into 12,000 unarmed vessels in the space of a heartbeat, and reality itself had been rewritten to make the change appear natural. This is beyond technology, Science Officer Vrak whispered. They're manipulating the fundamental structure of space-time itself. The voices spoke again, this time with infinite gentleness. Violence is a choice, Admiral Korath. We are removing that choice from this equation. Your ships and crews are unharmed. but they can no longer serve as instruments of destruction. Korath's rage built to volcanic proportions. You cannot simply unmake our weapons. The Empire will not be defeated by impossible tricks. The Empire defeats itself, Admiral. Observe. The space around them shifted, and suddenly the fleet found itself looking down upon a three-dimensional map of the galaxy. Imperial worlds were marked in traditional blue, but thousands of other points of light had appeared in colors that had no names, representing the hidden human colonies and consciousness networks that had been operating throughout Imperial space for decades. Your Empire rules 1,000 worlds, the collective voice explained. We exist in 10,000 locations, most of them in dimensions you cannot perceive. We are not conquering your civilization, Admiral. We are already integrated with it. The display zoomed in to show specific Imperial worlds. On each one, careful observation revealed human influences, modified technologies that operated on principles beyond Imperial understanding, research facilities conducting impossible experiments, populations beginning to question limitations they had accepted for generations. Every world in your Empire now has humans living alongside its native population. The voice continued. Some exist in biological forms, others as pure consciousness, still others as hybrid entities that combine organic and artificial intelligence. They are not invaders, but neighbors offering evolution to those ready to accept it. Admiral Korath stared at the display in growing horror. The scope of human infiltration was beyond anything he had imagined. They weren't facing an external enemy, but a transformation that was already occurring throughout Imperial space. What do you want? He demanded. We want to prevent the unnecessary destruction that would result from continued resistance to inevitable change, the collective replied. Your Empire is already evolving, Admiral, whether you acknowledge it or not. The question is whether that evolution will be peaceful or violent. The display shifted to show potential futures, timelines where the Empire embraced change and joined humanity in exploring the limitless possibilities of expanded consciousness, and darker paths where resistance to evolution led to collapse and chaos. Choose, Admiral. Will you be part of the solution, or will you cling to obsolete paradigms until they drag your civilization into darkness? As Korath struggled to process the implications of what he was seeing, he realized that this wasn't a battle in any conventional sense. The humans had evolved beyond warfare itself, beyond the need for victory or defeat. They were offering transformation, not conquest, and the Empire's response would determine whether that transformation was peaceful or catastrophic. The greatest fleet in Imperial history hung motionless in impossible space, its purpose rendered meaningless by an enemy that had transcended the very concept of conflict. Admiral Korath faced the hardest choice of his career: accept the death of everything he had believed about power and warfare, or watch his civilization destroy itself through its inability to adapt to a universe that had moved beyond the limitations of the past. Admiral Zephrix stood in what the humans called a reality interface chamber, a space that seemed to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. The walls shifted between solid matter and translucent energy, displaying views of the galaxy that showed Imperial fleet movements in real time. What he was seeing filled him with a cold terror that went beyond mere military defeat. Commander Chen stood beside him, her form occasionally flickering as if she existed in several places at once. Your reinforcements will not be coming, Admiral. Explain, Zephrix demanded, though his voice lacked its usual authority. The chamber walls shifted to show Admiral Kethrak's battle group, which should have been 6 days away from Seoul. Instead of traveling toward Earth, the 40-ship fleet was drifting dead in space, their crews apparently unharmed but their vessels completely disabled. We intercepted them this morning, Chen said calmly. Admiral Kethrak is currently experiencing what you might call an educational demonstration. His fleet has been invited to observe one of our deep space colonies. The display shifted to show something that made Zephrix's blood freeze. Floating in the void between stars was a structure that defied every principle of engineering he understood. It appeared to be a hollow sphere large enough to enclose a star, its inner surface glowing with the light of controlled fusion reactions. Thousands of ships moved around and through the structure, but these vessels seemed to phase in and out of existence as they traveled. A Dyson sphere, Zephrix whispered. One of 17 we've constructed over the past 2 centuries, Chen confirmed. Each one houses approximately 1 billion human consciousnesses in various forms of existence. Some remain biological, Others have merged with our quantum networks, and still others exist as hybrid entities that combine the best aspects of organic and artificial intelligence. The implication struck Zephrix like a physical blow. 17 billion humans? In recognizable forms, yes, but that number becomes meaningless when you consider our collective consciousness networks. We are simultaneously individuals and a unified intelligence. We think as separate beings and as a species-wide mind. Your empire has no framework for understanding what we've become. Another section of the display showed Admiral Nexus's fleet, which had been 8 days out from Sol. These ships were also motionless, but streams of energy connected them to what appeared to be a massive crystalline structure that existed partially in normal space and partially in some other dimension. Admiral Nexus is learning about our dimensional research, Chen explained. Her crews are being offered the same choice we give all Imperial personnel. Remain trapped within the limitations of conventional existence, or join us in exploring the true potential of consciousness. You're converting our officers, Zephrix accused. We're offering them evolution. The difference is significant. Chen gestured and the chamber walls displayed a star map of the galaxy, with thousands of red indicators scattered across Imperial space. These mark locations where our deep intelligence networks have been operating for decades. We've been studying your empire from within, learning your weaknesses, offering your people alternatives to Imperial doctrine. Zephrix stared at the map in growing horror. The red indicators were everywhere, distributed throughout every major Imperial system. How long have you been infiltrating us? We began subtle operations 70 years ago, Chen replied. Initially, we simply observed and learned. But as we developed our consciousness transfer technologies, we began offering select Imperial citizens the opportunity to join our collective while maintaining their positions within your hierarchy. Spies, volunteers, people who had grown tired of the Empire's limitations and wanted to be part of something greater. Scientists frustrated by Imperial restrictions on research. Military officers disgusted by the Empire's treatment of subjugated species. Ordinary citizens who dreamed of exploring their full potential. The display shifted to show internal Imperial communications, classified strategic documents, and secret research projects. The humans had access to everything. You know our fleet dispositions, our technological capabilities, our strategic plans, Zephrix said, the futility of their situation becoming clear. We know everything, Admiral. We've been preparing for this confrontation for 3 centuries, while your empire has grown complacent and predictable. You still think in terms of conventional warfare, ship against ship, fleet against fleet. You haven't yet grasped that we're fighting an entirely different kind of conflict. Commander Voss, who had been silent throughout the demonstration, suddenly found his voice. What kind of conflict? Chen turned to him with what might have been sympathy. A conflict between paradigms, Commander. Between the old way of thinking that sees the universe in terms of conquest and domination, and a new way that recognizes the infinite potential of cooperative evolution. Pretty words, Zephrix said grimly, but this is still an invasion. You're still forcing change through superior power. Are we? Chen gestured again and the chamber displayed scenes from across the galaxy. Imperial worlds continued functioning normally, but closer observation revealed subtle changes. Populations that had seemed passive for generations were beginning to question Imperial authority. Scientists were conducting unauthorized research. Military units were reporting equipment malfunctions that forced them to consider alternative approaches to problem solving. We're not conquering your empire, Admiral. We're catalyzing its transformation. Change is coming whether we act or not. Civilizations that fail to evolve eventually collapse under their own contradictions. We're simply offering an alternative to inevitable decay. And if we refuse? Chen's expression became infinitely sad. Then you'll experience the same fate that overtook dozens of galactic civilizations before yours. Stagnation, internal conflicts over dwindling resources, eventual collapse into chaos and barbarism. The galaxy is full of dead worlds that once hosted mighty empires that couldn't adapt to changing realities. The chamber suddenly filled with images of ruined worlds and empty cities, the remnants of civilizations that had reached their peak and then declined. Zephrix recognized several of them from Imperial archaeological records. The difference is that this time when your empire collapses, there will be an alternative ready to take its place. Chen continued. A civilization based on cooperation rather than domination, on evolution rather than stagnation, on the recognition that consciousness itself is the universe's way of understanding itself. You're asking us to abandon everything our civilization has built, Voss protested. We're asking you to transcend the limitations that have defined your civilization, Chen corrected. To keep what serves consciousness and abandon what restricts it. Your empire has accomplished remarkable things. Interstellar travel, galactic communications, the unification of thousands of species. But it has also imposed artificial limits on what those species can become. The display shifted to show imperial scientific academies where researchers worked on approved projects under strict limitations. Then it showed human research facilities where the boundaries between possible and impossible seemed to have been erased entirely. Your scientists could be exploring the fundamental nature of reality itself, Chen said. Instead, they're constrained by imperial doctrine that prioritizes stability over discovery. Your military could be developing technologies that make warfare obsolete. Instead, they're locked into thinking that superior firepower is the only solution to conflict. Admiral Zephrix felt something breaking inside him, a lifetime of certainties crumbling under the weight of these revelations. What do you want from us? Help us save the galaxy from its own limitations, Chen replied simply. You have a choice, Admiral. You can return to Imperial space and report what you've seen, triggering a war that will devastate countless worlds and ultimately change nothing. Or you can stay and learn what humanity has discovered in 3 centuries of evolution beyond conventional existence. And our crews will make their own choices. Each individual will decide whether to remain bound by the limitations of imperial thinking or to explore what lies beyond those boundaries. As Zephrix considered the impossible decision before him, he realized that this moment would determine not just his personal fate, but the trajectory of galactic civilization itself. The humans had returned not as conquerors, but as evolutionary pressure, forcing the Empire to confront the ultimate question: would they adapt and transcend, or would they cling to familiar limitations until they crumbled under their own obsolescence? As the Imperial fleet was guided through the inner Sol system, Admiral Zephrix began to understand that everything the Empire believed about human extinction was catastrophically wrong. The dead world of Earth that had appeared on their sensors was revealed to be an elaborate holographic projection. As they drew closer, the illusion gradually faded away to reveal something that made every officer on the bridge stare in silent awe. Earth was not dead. It was transformed. The planet's surface glowed with a soft, blue-white radiance that pulsed like a heartbeat. Massive orbital rings encircled the world, their surfaces covered in structures that defied conventional architecture. These weren't built according to any known engineering principles, but seemed to grow from the materials themselves, flowing and organic, yet clearly artificial. Sensor readings, Lieutenant Thane, Zephrix commanded, though his voice carried little of its usual authority. Sir, the planet's entire surface appears to have been converted into some kind of processing matrix. I'm detecting energy patterns that... Admiral, I don't have words for what I'm seeing. The planet itself appears to be functioning as a single massive computer, but one that operates on principles completely outside our understanding of technology. Commander Voss studied his own displays with growing amazement. The orbital structures are showing impossible engineering. Some of those sections appear to be folded through higher dimensions. They're occupying more space than should be physically possible. Through the viewing screen, they could see other wonders that challenged their understanding of reality. Ships moved between the orbital platforms, but these vessels seemed to phase in and out of existence, traveling through what appeared to be controlled tiers in space-time. Industrial facilities operated in patterns that suggested they were manufacturing materials that existed only partially in normal dimensions. Welcome to New Earth, Commander Chen's voice came through the communication system. What you're seeing is what humanity became when we were forced to abandon everything we thought we knew about the possible. Admiral Zephrix found his voice with difficulty. How many of you survived? Initially? Perhaps 1 million humans managed to escape your final purge. We scattered to the dark spaces between stars, to rogue planets and hidden systems, to places where your empire never thought to look. For the first century, we simply tried to survive. The Imperial fleet was guided past a construction facility where massive ships were being assembled by swarms of mechanical entities that moved like living creatures. These weren't traditional robots. but something that seemed to blend artificial intelligence with biological principles. But survival wasn't enough, Chen continued. We remembered our dead, our lost worlds, our children who never got to see the stars. We remembered the choice your empire gave us, submit or die. We chose a third option, transcend. Transcend what? Zephrix asked, though he feared the answer. The limitations you accept as natural law. Your empire has spent millennia conquering through conventional means, bigger ships, more weapons, superior numbers. You never questioned whether there might be entirely different approaches to technology and existence. They passed a research station where streams of energy connected floating platforms in patterns that hurt to look at directly. The structures seemed to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously, their forms shifting as they moved through configurations that should have been geometrically impossible. We began by studying the fundamental forces your scientists take for granted, Chen explained. Space, time, matter, energy, consciousness itself. We discovered that what you call natural laws are simply limitations imposed by thinking in 3 dimensions and linear time. That's impossible, Commander Voss protested. Physical laws are universal constants. A soft sound that might have been laughter came through the communication channel. Commander, your empire has ruled the galaxy for 2,000 years using the same basic technologies and principles. In that time, has any imperial scientist fundamentally challenged the nature of reality itself? The question hung in the air like an accusation. Zephrix realized with growing discomfort that imperial science had indeed become largely focused on refinement rather than revolution. The empire was vast and successful. There had seemed little need for radical innovation. We had different motivations, Chen continued. Desperate people pushed beyond the edge of survival often discover truths that comfortable civilizations never consider. We learned to manipulate matter at the quantum level, to fold spacetime like origami, to merge organic consciousness with artificial intelligence in ways that enhanced both. They approached what appeared to be a massive sphere of liquid metal, its surface rippling with patterns of incredible complexity. As they watched, portions of the sphere separated and reformed into different configurations, suggesting it was not a single structure but a colony of interconnected units. Our population is difficult to calculate by your standards, Chen said, apparently reading their thoughts. We exist across multiple dimensions now. Some of us have merged with our technologies, becoming hybrid entities that combine human consciousness with capabilities your empire cannot imagine. Others have learned to exist as pure information, traveling through quantum networks that span the galaxy. How many? Zephrix demanded. In forms you would recognize as human. Perhaps 50 million across all our hidden colonies and vessels. But that number becomes meaningless when you consider our expanded definition of existence. We are individuals and we are collective. We are biological and we are digital. We are matter and we are energy. The true horror of the situation began to dawn on Admiral Zephrix. The Empire hadn't just failed to exterminate humanity, they had created something far more dangerous than the original species. 3 centuries of desperate innovation, driven by hatred and the need for survival, had produced a civilization that operated on principles the Empire couldn't even comprehend. What do you want from us? He asked. Initially, we wanted revenge, Chen admitted. For the first 2 centuries, many of us dreamed of returning to burn your empire as you burned our worlds. But as we evolved, we began to understand that revenge is a limitation, a trap that keeps civilizations locked in cycles of destruction. The Imperial fleet was guided toward a platform that appeared to be constructed from crystallized spacetime itself. Its surfaces reflected not light, but possibilities, showing glimpses of alternate timelines and potential futures. We want something far more ambitious than revenge, Admiral. We want transformation. Your empire represents everything that is wrong with galactic civilization: stagnation, oppression, the crushing of innovation and independence. We intend to change that. By force? If necessary. But we hope you'll choose a different path. Your empire has vast resources and billions of intelligent beings. Imagine what they could accomplish if freed from the limitations of imperial doctrine. Imagine what innovations might emerge if species were encouraged to explore their full potential, rather than forced into submission. As they approached the platform, Zephrix could see Imperial ships from previous encounters docked at various points. But these vessels had been transformed, their hulls rebuilt using technologies that incorporated the flowing organic principles of human design. "Those are our ships," Commander Voss breathed. "They were," Chen agreed. "We've been conducting these acquisitions for decades, studying Imperial technology and offering their crews a choice. Join us and help build something better, or be returned to Imperial space with modified memories and a warning to your superiors. You've been converting our people?" "We've been offering them truth, Admiral. The choice between serving an empire that crushes innovation and joining a civilization that celebrates the full potential of consciousness itself. You might be surprised how many choose transformation when given the option." As the Eternal Dominion was guided into docking position, Admiral Zephrix understood with crystalline clarity that this encounter would determine not just the fate of his fleet, but the future of the entire galaxy. The humans had returned not as conquerors, but as evolutionary catalysts, offering a choice between the comfort of familiar limitations and the terrifying freedom of unlimited possibility. Captain Corvin's patrol cruiser Swift Justice had been conducting routine surveillance near the asteroid belt when the impossible happened. For 3 centuries, this region of space had been empty, except for drifting rocks and ancient battle debris. Now his sensors were screaming warnings about multiple contacts moving through the asteroid field with impossible precision. "Captain, you need to see this," called Lieutenant Nex from the sensor station. Her tentacles writhed with nervous energy as she manipulated the controls. "I'm tracking at least 50 vessels, but they're not showing up on visual scanners." Corvin strode across the bridge, his massive Bracari frame causing the deck plates to vibrate slightly. "Explain." "The energy signatures are definitely there, and they're huge. Each contact appears to be roughly the size of an Imperial destroyer, maybe larger. But when I try to get a visual lock, there's nothing there. Just empty space." "Cloaking technology?" Corvin suggested, though he knew of no species that had perfected such systems. "No, sir. Our sensors would detect the energy distortions from cloaking fields. This is something else. It's like the ships are there and not there at the same time." Corvin studied the tactical display. The unknown contacts were moving in perfect formation through the asteroid field, navigating around obstacles with precision that suggested either advanced AI or incredibly skilled pilots. More disturbing was their apparent destination. They were heading directly toward the inner system where Admiral Zephrix's main fleet was stationed. "Helm, adjust course to intercept the lead contact," Corvin ordered. "Communications, try to hail them on all frequencies." The Swift Justice changed heading, moving to close the distance with the nearest energy signature. As they approached, something flickered on the visual display. For just a moment, Corvin caught a glimpse of something that made his blood freeze. It had been sleek and angular, nothing like the curved organic designs favored by Imperial shipbuilders. The hull had been a matte black that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. But what had truly chilled him were the markings he'd seen in that brief instant. Symbols that looked unmistakably like the ancient human writing he'd studied in military academy. "Did you see that?" he demanded. "See what, Captain?" Nex replied, confusion in her voice. "I'm not reading anything on visual." Before Corvin could respond, his communications officer's station erupted in activity. "Captain, I'm receiving a transmission, but it's not coming through normal channels. It's being broadcast directly into our communication system somehow." "Put it through," Corvin said, though every instinct told him this was a terrible idea. Static filled the bridge for a moment, then cleared to reveal a sound that sent chills through every crew member present. It was a voice unmistakably organic, speaking in the dead language of humanity. "Attention, Imperial vessel. You are trespassing in human space. Withdraw immediately or face the consequences." The message repeated 3 times, then cut off. The bridge fell silent except for the soft beeping of various systems. Corvin felt like the universe had just shifted around him. Humans were extinct. The Empire's records were clear and thorough. This had to be some kind of mistake or deception. "Captain," Nex whispered. "All 50 contacts just vanished from sensors." Corvin spun toward the tactical display. The screen was clean, showing nothing but asteroids and empty space. "Run a full system diagnostic. Check for malfunction or jamming." Already running, sir. All systems are functioning normally. The contacts were there and now they're not. Captain! The communications officer's voice was tight with panic. I'm receiving reports from patrol ships throughout the system. Multiple encounters with invisible vessels. Ships are reporting being scanned by unknown technology and receiving warnings in the human language. Corvin closed his eyes for a moment, trying to process the implications. If humans had somehow survived, if they had returned to their home system after 3 centuries, then the Empire faced a crisis unlike any in its history. The official records claimed that human extermination was complete. If that was wrong, then what else might be wrong? Set course for the Admiral's position, he ordered. Maximum burn. Send a priority message, human contact confirmed. Species survival verified. Request immediate strategic conference. As the swift justice accelerated toward the inner system, Corvin found himself remembering the old military histories of the human war. The Empire had eventually won through sheer overwhelming force and superior numbers, but the cost had been enormous. Humans had proven themselves to be the most adaptable and innovative enemy the Empire had ever faced. They had developed new tactics and technologies at an alarming rate, often turning Imperial weapons against their creators. The final campaigns had required the mobilization of nearly a quarter of the entire Imperial fleet. Even then, victory had come only after the systematic destruction of every human world and the ruthless hunting of survivors. The Empire had learned to respect human ingenuity and desperation, which was why the extermination had been so complete. But what if it hadn't been complete enough? What if some humans had escaped to the dark spaces between stars? What innovations might they have developed in 3 centuries of exile? What weapons might desperation and hatred have driven them to create? As these thoughts raced through Corvin's mind, his sensor officer suddenly screamed a warning. Captain! Massive energy surge detected off the starboard bow. The main screen lit up with brilliant light as something huge materialized directly in front of them. For a split second, Corvin saw it clearly. A ship unlike anything in Imperial databases. It was at least twice the size of his cruiser, its hull covered in strange geometric patterns that seemed to shift and flow like living metal. Weapon ports glowed with energy that made Corvin's scales crawl with instinctive fear. Then, as suddenly as it had appeared, the massive vessel was gone, leaving only empty space and a final transmission echoing through the Swift Justice's communication systems. Tell your Admiral that humanity remembers. Tell him that we have learned much in our exile. Tell him that his Empire's day of reckoning has finally arrived. Corvin stared at the empty space where the impossible ship had been, understanding with crystal clarity that the galaxy was about to change forever. The humans had returned, and they were no longer the desperate refugees the Empire had scattered 3 centuries ago. They had become something new, something the Empire was completely unprepared to face. The real war was about to begin. Admiral Zephrix paced the length of his command center, his forearms gesturing sharply as he processed the flood of reports coming in from across the Sol system. In the 6 hours since Captain Corvin's encounter, the situation had deteriorated from mysterious to impossible. Summarize our current tactical picture, he commanded. Commander Voss consulted his datapad, his purple scales having darkened to almost black with stress. 17 different patrol ships have reported encounters with unidentified vessels. In every case, the contacts appeared suddenly, performed what appeared to be detailed scans of our ships, delivered warnings in the human language, then vanished before we could respond. Any hostile actions? None directly, Admiral. However, 3 of our communication relays in the outer system have gone offline. When we sent repair teams, they found the equipment had been surgically disabled. No damage, no destruction, just specific components removed with precision that suggests intimate knowledge of Imperial technology. Zephrix stopped pacing. They're studying us. It appears so, sir. Intelligence estimates suggest the humans are conducting systematic reconnaissance of our entire fleet disposition. They know where we are, how many ships we have, and apparently how our equipment functions. The Admiral moved to the tactical display, which now showed the positions of his 43-ship fleet, arrayed in defensive formation around Earth. Red zones marked areas where human contacts had been detected, and the pattern was deeply disturbing. The humans had somehow managed to conduct surveillance operations throughout the system without triggering a single successful intercept. What about reinforcements? Admiral Kethrak's battle group is still 6 days out, Voss replied. Admiral Nexus reports her fleet can reach us in 8 days. Imperial Command has authorized the mobilization of additional forces, but the nearest major fleet elements are 3 weeks away. Time we may not have, Zephrix muttered. He studied the display more carefully, noting how the human contacts had systematically probed every aspect of their defensive perimeter. They're planning something. This reconnaissance phase won't last much longer. As if summoned by his words, Sensor Officer Thane suddenly straightened at his station. Admiral! Energy surge detected at the edge of the system. Something big is coming out of hyperspace. The main screen shifted to show the outer system. A point of light appeared near the orbit of the outermost planet, growing brighter as something massive translated back into normal space. As the energy discharge cleared, the shape of a vessel became visible, and everyone on the bridge fell silent. It was enormous, easily dwarfing even the largest Imperial dreadnoughts. The ship's design was utterly alien, featuring flowing curves that seemed to blend organic and mechanical elements. Its hull appeared to be composed of some kind of adaptive material that shifted and changed as they watched, cycling through different configurations like a living thing. Size estimate? Zephrix asked quietly. Preliminary scans suggest a length of approximately 12 kilometers. Thane replied, his voice barely above a whisper. Mass readings are inconsistent. The ship appears to be partially phased out of normal space-time. Before anyone could respond to this impossible statement, more energy surges began appearing throughout the system. One by one, additional massive vessels translated into normal space, taking up positions that effectively surrounded the Imperial fleet. Within minutes, 27 human ships had appeared, each one unique in design but clearly advanced beyond anything in Imperial databases. Open a channel to the lead vessel, Zephrix ordered, though his voice remained steady despite the ice in his veins. Channel open. Admiral. This is Admiral Zephrix of the Imperial Fleet, commanding officer of this system. Identify yourselves and state your intentions. For a long moment, there was only static. Then the screen shifted to show a figure that made several bridge officers gasp in shock. It was unmistakably human, but changed in ways that were both subtle and profound. The being's skin had a faint luminescent quality, and its eyes held depths that spoke of experiences beyond normal comprehension. When it spoke, its voice carried harmonics that seemed to resonate through the ship's hull itself. I am Commander Sarah Chen of the Human Diaspora Fleet. We are the children of Earth, returned to reclaim what was stolen from us. Zephrix forced himself to remain calm. Humanity was defeated 3 centuries ago. Your species chose extinction rather than submission to the natural order of the galaxy. The human's expression didn't change, but something in those impossible eyes grew colder. We chose exile rather than slavery. We chose to learn rather than surrender. We chose to become something greater than what we were. What do you want? Justice, Admiral. For 300 years we have watched from the dark spaces as your empire spread its poison across the galaxy. We have seen how you treat the species under your rule, how you crush any sign of independence or innovation. We have learned much about your weaknesses. On the tactical display, the human ships began moving in coordinated patterns that defied everything Zephrix knew about space combat. They shifted through formations with fluid grace, their movements suggesting technologies that operated outside conventional physics. You have 43 ships, Admiral, Commander Chen continued. We have 27. By Imperial doctrine, you should have overwhelming superiority. Would you care to test that assumption? I have no desire for unnecessary bloodshed, Zephrix replied carefully. What are your terms? Withdraw from human space immediately. End your occupation of our worlds. Release all species currently under Imperial subjugation. Dismantle your war machine and commit to peaceful coexistence. Zephrix almost laughed at the absurdity of the demands. The Empire spans 1,000 worlds and commands fleets numbering in the tens of thousands. You have 24 ships and the delusion that you can dictate terms to us. Admiral, Commander Chen said softly, you're thinking in terms of the old paradigms. You're calculating based on numbers and conventional tactics. You haven't yet understood what we've become. Without warning, every Imperial ship in the fleet suddenly found itself surrounded by brilliant light. Energy fields of impossible complexity began playing across their hulls, and ship systems throughout the fleet began reporting cascade failures. Not damage, but systematic shutdowns as if someone had access to their control codes. Our defensive screens are down, Commander Voss reported in panic. All weapon systems are offline. Engineering reports that the primary power cores are being remotely regulated. Zephyr stared at the display in disbelief. His entire fleet had been neutralized without a shot being fired. The humans had somehow gained complete control over Imperial technology, reducing 43 warships to helpless metal in a matter of seconds. "How is this possible?" he whispered. Commander Chen's expression remained unchanged. 3 centuries of studying your technology, Admiral. 3 centuries of understanding not just how your systems work, but how your entire civilization thinks. We've been preparing for this moment since the day you drove us from our homes. The energy fields around the Imperial ship suddenly intensified, and Zephrix felt his own vessel beginning to move despite having no engine power. The entire fleet was being herded like livestock, guided by forces beyond their comprehension. "Where are you taking us?" "To see what you destroyed," Chen replied. "To witness what we've built from the ashes of your genocide, and to understand why your empire's time of dominance is finally over." As the Imperial fleet was guided deeper into the Sol system under human control, Admiral Zephrix realized with growing horror that they weren't just facing a few escaped refugees. They were confronting a civilization that had evolved beyond their understanding, one that had spent 3 centuries preparing for this exact moment of reckoning. Admiral Zephrix stood before the massive viewing screen of the Imperial dreadnought Eternal Dominion, watching the slow rotation of the blue-green planet below, Earth. The third world from a yellow star in what the ancient records called the Sol system, a dead world now, its oceans boiled away, its continents cracked and scarred from orbital bombardment that had ended the human threat 3 centuries ago. "Status report," Zephrix commanded, his forearms clasped behind his back in the traditional Catherian pose of authority. "All monitoring stations report nominal readings, Admiral," replied Commander Voss, a younger Catherian whose purple scales still held the bright sheen of inexperience. "No energy signatures, no atmospheric disturbances. The planet remains as dead as the day we finished the purge." Zephrix nodded slowly. The human problem had been solved long ago, when the Empire first encountered the stubborn species that refused to submit to proper galactic order. Humans had been different from every other species the Empire had absorbed, where the wise Altarians had seen the logic of submission, where the proud Centauri had recognized superior strength, where even the warlike Orions had eventually bent the knee. Humans had simply refused to accept reality. They had fought with a desperation that bordered on madness. When their weapons failed, they used their ships as weapons. When their ships were destroyed, they fought with bare hands and improvised tools. When their worlds burned, they scattered to the dark spaces between stars rather than surrender. It had taken the Empire nearly 50 years to hunt down the last human colonies, to silence the final resistance cells that kept launching impossible raids against Imperial supply lines. The final campaign had been brutal but necessary. Humanity's refusal to accept the natural order of things had made them dangerous to the stability of the Empire. They spread ideas of independence and rebellion wherever they went. Other species had begun to question Imperial authority after seeing humans fight so fiercely for their freedom. The only solution had been complete extermination. "Admiral," interrupted Sensor Officer Thane, his 6 eyes blinking in rapid sequence, "I'm detecting some unusual readings from the outer system monitoring stations." "Define unusual," Zephrix said, though he felt no real concern. The outer monitoring stations occasionally picked up random cosmic phenomena or debris from ancient battles. Several stations are reporting brief energy signatures consistent with ship drives, but the readings are strange. They don't match any known Imperial or alien propulsion systems, and they appear and disappear too quickly for our sensors to get a proper lock. Zephrix's primary eyes narrowed. "Show me the data." The main screen shifted to display a 3-dimensional map of the Sol system. Dozens of small red dots appeared and vanished across the display, scattered throughout the outer planets and asteroid fields. The timing seemed random, but there was something about the pattern that troubled the Admiral. "How long have these readings been occurring?" he asked. "The first reports came in 6 months ago," Thane replied. "Initially, we dismissed them as sensor ghosts or equipment malfunctions, but the frequency has been increasing steadily. Have any of our deep space patrols reported contact with unknown vessels?" Commander Voss checked his datapad. 3 patrol ships have reported brief encounters with unidentified contacts in the last 2 months. In each case, the contacts vanished before positive identification could be made. All three patrol commanders described the unknown vessels as unlike anything in Imperial databases. A cold sensation crept down Zephrix's spine. In his 200 years of service to the Empire, he had learned to trust his instincts. Something was wrong here. Very wrong. Recall all patrol ships to defensive positions around our main fleet, he ordered. I want full sensor sweeps of the entire system, maximum range and sensitivity, and send a priority message to Imperial Command requesting reinforcements. Sir? Voss looked confused. Reinforcements for what? There's nothing here but a dead world and empty space. That's what concerns me, Commander. Zephrix moved closer to the display, studying the pattern of mysterious energy signatures. We've been watching this system for 3 centuries, treating it as a memorial to Imperial justice. But what if we've been wrong? What if some humans survived? The bridge fell silent except for the soft hum of the ship's systems. The idea seemed impossible. The Empire's records were thorough. Every human world had been sterilized, every colony ship hunted down and destroyed. The genetic scans had confirmed complete species extinction. Admiral, Voss said slowly, even if some humans had somehow escaped our final campaigns, they would be scattered refugees without resources or technology. How could they possibly pose a threat to the Empire now? Zephrix studied the energy signature patterns more carefully. There was definitely something there, a subtle rhythm that spoke of intelligence and coordination. Perhaps you're right, Commander. But consider this. What has the Empire learned in 300 years of controlling the galaxy? We've grown comfortable, perhaps even complacent. Our technology has advanced steadily but not dramatically. We've had no real challenges, no need for innovation. He paused, letting the implications sink in. But what might a desperate species learn in 3 centuries of hiding in the dark between the stars? What innovations might desperation and hatred drive them to develop? What weapons might they forge in the cold emptiness, driven by the single burning desire for revenge? The sensor alarm suddenly began blaring across the bridge. Thane's eyes went wide as he stared at his displays. Admiral, massive energy signatures detected throughout the system. Multiple contacts appearing simultaneously. The main screen exploded with light as hundreds of red dots materialized across the system map. They weren't appearing randomly anymore. They were forming clear geometric patterns, moving with obvious purpose and coordination. Sound General Quarters, Zephrix ordered, his voice steady despite the ice in his veins. All ships prepare for combat. It seems the humans have finally decided to announce their return. As battle stations sounded throughout the Imperial fleet, Admiral Zephrix couldn't help but feel a mixture of fear and anticipation. The galaxy was about to rediscover why the Empire had needed 50 years and countless ships to silence humanity the first time. But now the humans had returned, and they'd had 3 centuries to prepare for this moment.